welcome to my Tuesday night live painting demo. Oh, an error occurred. Why? Oh, it is working. Okay. Um, yes, a little bit of a false start there. Hello, welcome to my live painting demo. I just got a big error thing message on my screen, and even though it was live, it was telling me it wasn't. Anyway, welcome to my Tuesday night live painting demo. I hope I haven't bored you to death so far. Please stick with me. I have a new painting set up and it's taking a little bit of a trial and error, but hopefully it will do a much better job than my setup before because I was streaming live through my phone and I was getting all kinds of drop offs because of my poor Wi Fi service in my house. Right now I have two webcams, one to be able to show the panel that I'm going to be painting on, and then I also have my palette that you can see is shot straight down so you can see me working, and then you can see a small photo of the reference of the model that I'm painting tonight. That is Pasha. I found her on Pinterest, but she does have a Instagram page. I will probably post the link to that in the description of this video afterwards if you're so curious to see more, or you can just go to my Instagram page and there'll be the information there. So I'm just going to get a little bit mixed up just to get started, so I just don't have this complete blank thing. And I mixed up a little bit of what's called Toric Gray. It's a color from Gamblin paint. It's just basically all the leftover paint from after they've mixed all their colors. Then they take all that extra paint and they mix what they call Toric Gray out of that, um, and then they just give that away with their other paints. I think they do have a contest once a year to see who does the best painting using that paint. Um, make sure I get a little bit of measurement going here so I don't get too far. There's a camera in my way. How did that happen? Okay, I'm gonna have to adjust a little bit here so that I can work around it. And sorry for the close-ups of my furry arm there. Okay, so her hairline is closer to about there. And let me drop my reference down a little bit so I'm seeing it side by side. Yep. The nose is going to be probably further down too. Really do have this webcam quite close, to much closer to the panel than I had my phone. That's the base of her nose is around there. Let me start to get a center line. Make sure. So that's her center line's going to be something like that. Um, that's her hairline. Let me get her brow line. Yep, that actually is close to her brow line there. And then that means her eyes sit right in here. Her mouth. And I have to redraw the chin to make sure I get that in the right place. Okay, measurement of the chin. It's about 3 inches from the bottom. Something like that. Okay. Once I get us to a certain point in the painting, it is a little bit easier to compare it to the reference and see where things are. But right off the bat, it is a little bit hard to get started with things in the right place, and that's why it takes a fair amount of measuring to get going. So now I'm going to start looking a little more closely. Can start changing my colors. I have two mediums. Actually, one's a solvent and one's a medium. So solvent, I use Gamsol. For the medium, I'm using a safflower oil that is commonly used in Gamblin paint, which I use for their cooler colors. It's used to make a radiant white, which is just like titanium white, but it uses safflower oil instead of linseed oil. Let's just get a little better indication. And I can see the whites of her eyes are quite purple in the reference, and I think I'm going to go in that direction. I don't always perfectly match the colors that I see. Sometimes I'll give it some of my own flavor or spice, but in this case, I think I do want to try to match some of there's really some nice subtle colors that are going on in this reference, and finding some of the form. So I have, if I think about it, I have the top edge of her lower lid here. If I'm brave enough to get that detailed at this point. Let's do a quick measurement to see if I'm even close. No. So the corner of her eye is about here. That means that her iris is going to be here. So I got to move everything over just a little bit. So I can use that same purple, a little bit of black in it. It's darker. Oh, that's really dark. It's darker on this side than the other side, and so then I can go a little bit lighter on the inside of it. And I almost want to go pure black. I'm seeing a touch of blue or green in her eye, so I can get a little bit of the the phthalo blue in there with the black. So I can have a little bit of differentiation between the color of her eye, where the pupil sits, etc. Okay, let's get a remeasurement there. That's to the... I'm going to have to do that differently again with the camera. A little bit of adjusting here. So that's where the base is. It has to drop down a little bit. So let me pull that down a little bit lower. I can still use the dark that I had there for her brow, but I want to put her pupil down lower and then have her eyeshadow is creating the dark of the upper lid. That's great. Okay, so let me just turn the sound up to make sure it's okay in my... Yep, sounds okay. Good. A little bit of a sound check there. If you're watching and you want to let me know where you're watching from, and or if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I'm going to get a little bit of black in the color of the lower eyelid. It's just has a bit of dark eyeshadow there, and it's muting the color, her skin tones. It's creating a little bit of drama and interest there. So I want to make sure that I capture that. Then by creating pools of color, I can then modulate darker or lighter, more colorful, push the hue in one direction or another. So I'm going for the color that's underneath her eye. And then I want to go lighter after that. So I'm looking for the shelf, the area of underneath her eye that faces upward. And then until about here where it's catching the light. And I want to improve the shape of her eye a little bit. I drew it in, but I wasn't paying very close attention to how fast the shape of the lid and how fast that dropped off. And I'm looking for that color that's in the corner of her eye right here. It's very dark. And then leans red above that. I'm just getting a little bit of the naphthol red in there. And then I have the brow that comes in right above that with very little space. In fact, I have to make that space a little narrower. Something like that. It gives that some intensity. And just for kicks, let me get a measurement first, but make sure I'm on the right track. let's redo that measurement again. After practice measuring, so that looks like it's about the right place. Measuring from one side of the iris to the edge of the panel, that looks right on. So if I do everything relative to the edges of the panel, then I know that, and then I'll measure from one feature to another. I can keep all those relative distances right, and then so I'll kind of be on my way to at least getting a sense of a likeness, or have all the pieces fit together. And how much I want there to be a likeness, I can determine as I get further in the painting. Whether sometimes a painting looks good, but it doesn't look like the person, and I decide that that's fine. And other times I really do want it to look more like the model, or capture more of the expression, and I'll work a little bit longer to try to get that likeness working. Okay, so I do need to go a little bit lighter in the white of her eye here, and maybe bluer. Gone a little bit too violet, and I'm seeing a little bit of blue here in the corner. And I'm going to trim the pupil, the iris, a little bit here. And I'm going to come back later and readjust some of those colors. Do you want this light side to be a little bit darker? Okay, and I'm getting a little bit red here. Let's get a warmer red. Touch of black is fine. Oop, too much black. Right here. Okay, I need to go a little bit lighter and a little bit redder. So just fine adjustment. That may be a little bit too intense, but I can knock it back later. And then the color there. Okay. So what am I missing is a little bit of a yellowish white here, or it actually looks blue. That bit of her eyelashes that are catching the light has a very cool white sense to it. And throw a little bit in there. I think it feels like it needs to be higher. And can carve into it a little bit to give it the right character. And then there's just a thin strip of red between that and the white of her eye, which is the lower edge of her upper lid. Okay. All right. So I'm starting to see it. Okay, and so then this dark area that's in the corner comes out a little bit further. I had her nose maybe a little bit over to one side, so need to get another measurement here for the edge of her nose. That's right on. And then her nose, the center line is a little bit at an angle. She's got the deep edge along the nostril. Same there, and then it comes back up. And there's nothing so defined there. I'm going to end up painting most of that out and putting more subtle color against color there eventually. Okay, just going to move some of these things over that I had too far over, so her mouth is more like here. And her mouth is somewhat pursed, if that's the right word. It's like pulled together a little bit, and that's creating that kind of sense of determination in her expression. If you think about, if you make that same shape with your mouth, then you can kind of start to feel that same expression. And I sometimes do that. I'll like I'll make that expression as I'm painting it so that I can kind of feel what it is that I'm going after. And then in the end, if I look at the painting and I feel that kind of expression, then I know I'm on the right track. Okay, and then she has the one corner of her jaw. She has a nice angular jaw, so it's easier to find these points. If someone has a very round face, then it gets a lot tougher. So, and she has one corner up here. Actually, if I look at it, it's a bit angled down from that edge. But it comes pretty close to her mouth. That's one thing I found. It's really hard, especially if someone's head is tilted forward a little bit. It's hard to make these distances small enough. It's really tempting to spread those kind of things out. Okay, and I think I need a little bit bigger brush, so I'm going to grab a nice flat. I think this is a bright. Sorry, I think it's like a number 8. Doesn't have size on it. Must have been one of those very cheap brushes I got at Michael's. Okay, and I said I would start to obliterate that dividing line there. I just kind of needed to see where I was. And I can get very quickly to what I want if I leave blank the whites that I know it's going to be light. Eventually I'm going to paint white there, but I can just leave it now just so I can start to see it. Almost like a watercolor painting where you leave the whites are really the white of the paper. That's sort of the same idea. I want to get a little bit of that color in there. So here on the cheek I have red and a little bit darker red on this edge before the light is sort of obliterating the color, and get a little bit of orange in there because it's sort of a burnty kind of color, which indicates that there's maybe a little bit yellow and orange in there, and then it needs to be lighter in that corner. So I'm just mixing the colors in on the panel as I'm working, and that will give me some of those alla prima effects and some softer edges. There's a bit of yellows and greens in the upper lip, but not a lot. There's just a little bit of a shift, and then it gets darker as it gets towards the outer edge of the lip there. So I just want to be cautious or just aware of that. Okay, so I see there's Pixie Queen. Hi, I'm in Perth, Western Australia. Welcome. And Hollow1RS Gmail. Greetings from Chicago. That's Bex, is her name. And your new video setup is great. Thank you. Yeah, now you can see everything. Although maybe it's a little distracting, all the movement at once. But and right now I can see both my hand from both webcams at once, so it's almost like I have two hands going there. It's freaking me out a little bit, but here I just kind of want a kind of a dusty pink in the cheek here. Have it lean a little bit gray, then just a white mixed with red. So there's some other colors mixed in there that'll dull it down a little bit. Sometimes I'm not even conscious of how I get a lower intensity color. It's mostly that it gets a bunch of other colors mixed into it, and that kind of knocks it down a bit. So kind of as I work back and forth with a few different colors, then it will naturally get a little bit duller and will give me that kind of nice neutral grays that you need to kind of get the painting more grounded. Sort of how I think about it. You can have all these bright colors. Just cleaning the brush and then just wiping it off as I go, so I have so that the bristles of the brush are clean enough that I can get a nice clean mixture with my next make sure. So I'm looking right here underneath the neck. There's some purples and reds in there, leaning fairly gray. So I can just start to throw a little bit down there. I'm just going to get a touch of the oil because my paint is starting to get a bit short. And what I mean short is that I don't have a whole lot of length to my brush stroke. It's drying up pretty quickly. And then I want to indicate where the neck is. There's a little bit of background which is like a bluish black in the photo. And if I look, that comes straight down, almost straight down from the eyes, really starting about there and then coming right across to about here. May have to work a little bit to get the right shape to her neckline. And then something similar on the other side, but a different color, kind of more light green. And so again, going from where the eye is, although I don't really have that eye in firmly yet, but something like that. And I can just get a little bit washy with it, just to kind of indicate what's going on there. Okay, and then let's clean up the nose a little bit. I drew in a center line just to show you guys where it would be. And try to get some interesting color changes going on there, similar to the reference. And see, this edge right here is pretty hard, but in the reference you'll see it's a lot softer. I can just come over it with a fairly dry brush back and forth, and that'll blend it a little bit. Or I can come in with more paint and just paint a transitional color in between the two. Either way you want to approach it. It both works, or just create a slightly different aesthetic. And then I have some really strong red in the ear, and then I have the black of the hair. And for tonight I'm using ivory black. I've been using chromatic black the last few weeks, but while it gives me some really nice effects, at the same time it doesn't have a very strong tinting strength. It doesn't hold up very well to white, and so when there's a little bit of white in the paint, it's hard to keep the strength of that black going. And so switching it up a little bit, I can try out something new and see how I like it. Okay, so I just want to get a little bit of the dark mass of her hair just so I can start to see some of the colors that are in the face that are against the darkest dark of the painting. I have hair dropping down there. And then want to refine the edge of the face a little bit. That has just a touch of blue, darker blue along this edge. So let's paint over that gray that I put down there, and then stronger and darker blue here. And then I'm going to get a little bit of that white in that's along her neck, sort of again a pinkish gray color. A little bit more red right along the edge. And then back to that color in her neck. Kind of get some warm in there. Oh, went a little bit too light. Let's see if I can get that dark again. And then she has a little bit of darker red right on the edge of her chin. And then a bit of light on the top of her chin. I'm going to need to get some transitional colors going there between the dark and the light, so that it feels like a form that's turning in space as opposed to just a bunch of colors pushed up against each other. Okay, seeing some reds in here, and then some oranges and yellows, very gray. Gotta go a little more green, I think. Too green. So something between a green, back and forth between green and orange there before I get the color. And her mouth is a bit wider, so I'm gonna draw out the corners a little bit. With a pretty well delineated separation in her lips, or division in her lips, I should say. Okay, got a few more people here. Yehide Aina, how did you get so good? I do this every week, and I do paintings in between, so just keep on cracking at it. Um, I did also go to school, which helps. Amy Holstein says hello from Virginia, and love the new setup. I think I read that. Oh, your setup's great. Someone else said that. And what surface are you painting on? Says Hallow. This is um, a gessoed panel, gessoed hardboard. Um, there's a few different brands that make them. I like using Speedball Mona Lisa panels because on Blick they're very inexpensive and I like that. Um, the surface isn't so great by itself. I give it a one pass of gesso, which makes it just the way I want it. So a little extra effort has to go into it, but a panel this size, this is a 9 by 12, is about $2. An 8 by 10 is about $1.50. Um, compare that to ampersand panels, which run about $5 to $9 for the same size panel. So again, on Dick Blick, you can pick those up. If you're in the U.S., I'm not sure how you would get them if you live somewhere else, but um, you would probably be the expert of how to get art supplies where you live by now. But that's my recommendation if you're in the U.S. or Canada. So right around underneath the nose, there's lots of really nice bluish tones coming out. There really are more gray than blue, but against all the redder tones look kind of bluish. So I'm just going kind of with a little bit um, cooled down gray. And then there's some red appearing back again in the philtrum of her upper lip. And then some lights that are hitting right there, making her top of her lip glisten a little bit. Want to get that in, and I just want to pull down that division a little bit lower. There's kind of a downward curve to the division in her lips, and I'm using a little bit of black and a little bit of purple and alizarin permanent for that color there. That's pretty good. And then I'm gonna go pretty much quinacridone red for that red color in her lower lip. It's a very cool red. And then once I get some of those highlights in, it will really start to feel much more dimensional and wet too. There is kind of a wetness to that lip. Yep, that's feeling about right. And I'm getting a little bit of a orange transition here on this edge, kind of a softer edge, kind of soft transition there. Okay, and then let me get her. It's kind of a little distracting, or the eye that I really haven't painted yet. Let's get that a little bit better in the right place so it just doesn't look like she's disfigured. And again, a little bit of purple, fairly dark for the whites of her eyes. I think I want a little more color in it than I put. A touch of blue. So I got to clean it up a little bit if I want to get the color to show. And I need to do a little bit of measurement. Again, I'm seeing some greens and blues in her iris. And that can be fairly dark. And then adding in black for the pupil and for the upper portion and along the outer edge. And then I can just go even darker in the iris to give it a little more depth. And then I want to get a little more control over the shape of it. And I'm going to do, luckily that measurement's good, and I'm going to measure from the bottom of her iris to the top edge of the panel. Feels like I have it too high. Let me measure the other one, just make sure that they're relatively right. That one's pretty good. So I have to bring that eye down quite a bit. It's okay. How long did I spend on it so far? Maybe 30 seconds. So not such a big deal to paint it and then repaint it. Then I have a little bit of dark there that I can use for that upper eyelid. So something like that. And then I'm going to have to get a little bit of the light, the whites of her eyes coming underneath towards the middle. Okay, let's see if that's a little bit better position. A little more measuring. Bear with me, folks. That is right on. Okay. Just right where it needs to be. So it's a matter of it now adjusting the edges of her eye so that they're doing the right thing. And then I also want to watch the relative distance or position of the corners of her eyes. There's a little bit of a downturn, and so her corner here should be much lower on this side. So I have to think about that as I work on it. So her eye is in the right place, but the corner of her eye wasn't. And so really is in a way I was kind of painting her eye in the wrong direction or the wrong position. So that does look a little bit better. And then don't have to lighten up the lights of her eyes so much. I need to go darker on the colors around it, in the iris and in the eyelids. Make sure I'm getting that lighter red that's coming in above top. Listen to my English. Okay, so you guys are commenting faster than I can read, but that's okay. Better than it being totally quiet. Yehide says, how much do you think a painting like this will sell for? So these have been more practice for me, but I have been posting them to my Etsy shop and have set a pricing based on size. So this is the 9x12 size that I have priced at, I think is $4.25. I don't remember offhand. I think the pricing started off at $3.95. I can look real quick if let me see, Etsy. And if anyone's curious to go to my Etsy shop, it's Etsy at Etsy/shop/AJ and that's how you would get to my Etsy shop. And looking real quick for that size, I think this painting of Julian I have on here is that size. And 3, okay, where's the size? You're supposed to tell me in the description. That's 11 by 14. So that 11 by 14 is 375. So the 9 by 12 must be 345, something like that. And like I said, I haven't sold a lot of them. I've sold a few. I think if I start to get a little bit better known, then those will sell more. But for the most part, what I sell through my shop are portrait commissions. Um, Most people want a portrait of themselves or somebody they know. It's only once an artist gets well established and then people are interested in the work um, more for the artist wanting to own something from that artist, and or that there's something about that artist's style that's less what's the word, it's less realism. It's more stylized, and so that style is more, so when you look at the painting it looks like it's more about being a painting than it is a representation of a specific person, and that can be more interesting to people. But the way I paint does have a fair amount of realism in it. So the question is, when people see it, is, well, who is that in the painting? And as opposed to paintings that are much more stylized, you would just say, oh, that's a beautiful study, or it's a very nice painting. You wouldn't necessarily say, who is that in that painting? Anyway, so that's a little bit of the marketing and um, why it's a little bit harder to sell those. But I have been starting to sell more of them. So I think I'm just um, the quality of the painting is going up, and people are getting to know me more and want to own the painting for the painting itself, and that's kind of nice. It's kind of a reaffirmation that after putting in the hard work, there people are starting to see the quality in that work. Anyway, that was sort of a long story, and let me see. There was more. Karasai. I don't know how to. Karasi. Hello from California. You mentioned brushes earlier. Do you ever switch brushes, bristle to synthetic? If you can explain logic behind this and their purpose, thanks. So there's, I like to think of brushes in a couple different ways. There's the shape of the brush, and then there's the size and stiffness. And so I tend to use both synthetic and natural haired brushes. The synthetic brushes tend to be lot less expensive. So if you find a brand of synthetic brushes that you like, and they'll probably be more affordable than the natural hair version of the same brush, meaning a few dollars as opposed to um, tens or $20 for sometimes a similar brush. And I use a bristle style brush that's stiffer for certain types of brush strokes or certain um, sequences in the painting. And then I'll tend to use softer synthetic brushes for other passages in the painting. It just depends on what I'm after. Sometimes it's about a type of brushstroke, and then sometimes it's about where you are in the painting, because stiffer brushes will tend to pick up the paint, the layers of paint that are underneath. So you really want to use a stiffer brush if you want all the colors that you have down in the painting to mix together. And then you'll want a softer brush if you want to be able to put brush strokes right on top of existing, um, especially if it's still fairly wet, colors that are underneath. And that just takes a lot of practice to get a feel of the brush handling and what brush to use and to get the kind of effects you want. Um, I tend to try to use a bigger brush than then the area painting that's necessary for the area painting that I'm painting, because I want that kind of a sense of looseness. If you always use too small a brush, it will start to feel like you've tightened up on the painting and will maybe feel a little bit too tight. Not really feeling that the eyes are quite in the right place yet, but I can start to move those around until they feel like they're part of her face and that they relate to each other. I think part of it is I have this shadow probably a little bit too high here next to one of her eyes, and that's making her whole eye feel like it's too high. Let's see if I can get that transitional red that's in between that shadow and the color next to it, and then color that goes right under the eyelid there. That's a little bit better. I have to squeeze some of these forms down into a little bit smaller space before they feel right. Come up with that white again a little bit higher. And I want to make sure there's just a hint of white that comes down underneath this iris here. Really comes to points there. And then I want to maintain those specks of light that are along the edge here that really make it feel like the light's hitting some of those edges. Obviously this needs to be a little softer here, this transition, so I'm just going over with a clean brush between the two brush strokes. Then I'm seeing a bit of blue where some of this some of the forms are getting lost here. Bluish gray. And then I can see a little bit of detail in the ear. Let's go with the light pink orange there. And then hints of darker red where some of the forms are in the ear, and then more of a lighter white, lighter pink, on the outer edge. And then that's when our bluish background starts to come in. And that's fairly gray. I don't need a whole lot of blue with this white here. Okay, and I'm going to have to come in a little bit more in this cheek here, it feels like. I've given her a little bit too much cheek. That's okay. And I may have to do a measurement there to see if I'm in the right place. I'm not. That cheek is... something's a little off, but... Yep, I've cut into her cheek a little bit too much. So, overcompensated, but that's okay. And then I think that her jaw cuts in a bit higher. A little bit around here. And then her neckline starts up higher too. Okay, so making some of those adjustments so I can start to see where I am. A little bit of a dark red on the very bottom edge of her chin that goes darker than the neck underneath it in that one spot. So we got kind of a reversal there. It's darker in one spot at her neck, and then it's lighter in another spot. Okay, we're going to have to work out some of those very subtle color changes here and underneath her lip. Go a little bit darker and grayer right there. Okay. Okay, and I can't forget my yellow. I'm often starved for yellow in some places in a painting, and just because I don't reach for it often enough. Part of the problem is that yellow is such a powerful color. You just need just a little bit, and if you go add get a little bit too much yellow, then it's really hard to get it back to being neutral enough. And so you have to really be careful with it. Let's get a little bit of oil going with the white so I can do a nice smooth line along the edge of the jaw here. And let's get that depression in alongside her nose. A lot darker. It's got a bit of black in it. Okay, let me see, where did I leave off? I think I may have sort of touched on the information about brushes and how to use them. It's a very subtle thing and it takes a long time to figure out. So Marion Glazer says, Bay St. Louis. Hollow One says, any recommendation for brushes? I'm on Blick's site now looking at the panels. Thanks. I get my brushes from a bunch of different places. Sometimes at Michael's, I'll look for the Royal Langnickel brushes, which tend to be decent quality and fairly inexpensive. At least the sets they have at Michael's. You can buy those in sets and get a fair deal. Sometimes they have sales on their, um, I think it's number 3 line. I forget if the numbers go up when they're cheaper. But whatever the cheaper sets are, sometimes you can find some decent brushes there. Just take a look at the heads of the brushes and the firmness and the shape of the brushes, and see if they look like they're decent quality. And then the question is, how do they perform? So just try. They're not. They won't tend to be very expensive. You can try them out and continue to buy them there. I tend to beat up brushes pretty well, and so I don't want to spend a lot of money on brushes because I'm scrubbing paint into the panels and leaving them with paint on them sometimes. I used to leave paintbrushes standing in my solvent, and then all the hairs would end up curling, and I've gotten out of the habit, thankfully, of doing that, and my brushes are holding up a little bit better now that I've been a little bit more, um, been nicer to them, I guess I would say. Okay, let's get that real subtle colors going in the neck here. Let's get a healthy reddish gray going. And there's not much color there between the jaw and her neck. There's little indications that tell you where, what's what. But overall, as a shape, you want to just paint them very closely together in color and value. And then I can delineate a little bit with the light underneath here. Try again at that red there. Yeah. So it looks like the edge of her mouth, that's actually going to be up a little bit higher here. And this corner also up a bit higher, and then it drops down. So I'm just adjusting some of these as I go, and sometimes I overcompensate and I'll have to come back later and readjust again. Sometimes I'll do that 100 times in a painting. I'll change something until I get it in just the right place and the right color, etc. Okay, where was that dark area of the lid there, something like that, with a bit of purple, almost like giving her something that looks like a black eye. And then a little bit of a lighter light there. And it goes a little bit darker and purple along that edge. Okay, it still doesn't look like the eyes are lining up quite right yet, so I have a little bit of work to do on that. Okay, and I want to make sure we're seeing the top and the sides of the nose. A little bit where it's catching the light right here. So she has a light source that's to the to her right side, our left side, and that's what's giving her that light area of her face, and also lighting up certain features in her face as they reflect the light back to us. Let's get a little bit of this color in here. And because her head's tilted downward, I want to make sure that her ears are fairly high, that I'm getting them in the right place. So something like that. The other ear does feel like it needs to be higher too. Okay, I'm going to grab a bigger brush. This is that flat that I was using before, so I can get a lot of the hair blocked in, get a little more oil in here to make it a little more fluid. And then I want to get some of the background in too, so I can then adjust the edges too, to make sure the shape of her head is right and the shape of her hair is right. And then I'm getting the right colors and values in. You just make quick work of that. Sometimes you want to be careful if you want the brush strokes to be like the finished brush strokes of the painting. Then you kind of have to work a little bit slower and more deliberately to get strokes that are aesthetically right for a finished painting, even if it looks sketchy, that they have a nice aesthetic feel to them. Let's cut her jawline up a little bit higher. Okay, want that. Oops, I got a lot of paint, a lot of blue paint on the brush. That isn't what I wanted, but might as well use some of it here. Let's clean some of that off, so not turn everything blue. Well, I do need a little bit of blue for that background, so very light blue. Just let it all mix together, get it kind of a little bit softer. Okay, and I'm missing her earlobe and then her jewelry. That's coming out a little bit further. Kind of a pale red. That's a little bit too light. So knock it down a little bit again. is so angular. It is really, it makes it easier to paint and also makes it a little bit harder because I'm not used to painting such a sharp corner for her jaw. Let's go a little bit darker, duller red for the outer edge of her cheek here. Get a little more color in there. Yep, that looks like about right. Bit of orange in there. I want to make sure I keep that edge fairly soft so I get that kind of camera photographic look to it. Okay, need to go darker in that one spot where that edge turns the corner. Okay, I'm just going to make a quick subtle adjustments, although it's kind of early in the painting to worry about the eyes, but I am going to repaint her pupil. Make sure that that greenish blue color is dark enough. So it really is just kind of an emerald color coming through. Make her pupil a little bit larger since it's kind of in shadow there. And then I want that highlight spot to have a little bit of green in it. It is really sharp, so I have to lay it down so that it's kind of like a dab that sits on top of the other color around it. Not sure I did that so well right there, but I can also trim it a little bit. She's got a little bit of purple in her upper eyelid. It's really hard to see that color. And that's outlined by black. And let's get a little more black in her eyebrow here. Give it a little bit of dimension. And reddish black here for that shadow. And I do have to go darker for this purpley black that's underneath her eye. And then you can start to see the texture of the skin a little bit. Okay, and then we got to pull this corner of this eye up a little bit, I think. So it's definitely not matching up the way it should. Okay, let's get a little bit of these greens and yellows that are coming in over here. Okay, that's very gray here. Okay, just like, looking and adjusting to get the right colors in her cheeks and in her flesh tones. Just takes a little bit back and forth before they start to read like actual flesh. Half of it is getting the right value, and the other half is getting the right color. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the term value, that just means the level of light or dark in a color. Sort of like if you had turned the whole thing into a black and white photo, then that would be the representative light or dark of that particular color. So I've got a cooler red in the cheek here. And then I have a light orange color, fairly dull orange right here. That's too light. It's okay to start with that. Can knock it down. Okay, that's looking a bit better. Let's get a little bit of purple that's here in this upper cheek. And then we got a little bit of more yellowish color up here as this form right here faces upward. So we want to make sure that we're giving the right amount of light and color that tell the eye that that's facing up. And that this part is facing more directly towards the light. Okay, let me see. Crasili Taylor says, okay. Douglas Barton says, thank you so much for these demos. I love them. Do you manipulate the colors in Photoshop before painting? If so, do you have any tips? Maybe a short demo sometime. Well, this one I liked the color, but and I liked the low amount of contrast in the photo, especially where it gets softer around the neck and the chin. But I did boost the contrast a little bit from the original photo, just to give me a little bit more space to work within. When you have that almost no value change throughout the face, then that becomes really hard to paint. It's all about manipulating the colors, but within a fairly limited value, and that's just so hard to control. And so making that little bit of a bump in Photoshop is helpful. Sometimes I'll boost the color, or I'll do other things. I'll lean the photo, and if it's like too monochromatic, I'll try to find ways to add a little bit more color to it. So it really just depends on the photo. Let's get a little more green in the lights there, and a little bit more reds. It's a cool red, pink right here that I don't quite got yet. Yep, and this light has to come down a little bit further. Got a little bit of the shadow from the lips over the edge of the chin there. And this edge is a little bit softer. Again, I'm just using that clean brush over the edge there to get that. And then I'm missing some of the lights here along the edge of the chin. They come down underneath. So something like that. So I'm going to need a little bit of adjusting in there, but it doesn't look so bad at the moment. So let's see how badly that's going to need help later on. Can almost come in with pure white right here along this edge. It's picking up a little bit of the blue from the background and a little bit of pink from the cheek. Okay, so let's continue to make adjustments that I see where things are a little bit off from the photo. Let's get a little more green in here. Purple and purple. Sometimes you can look at a little area and see one color and then look back later and see some completely different color in there. And just this means that it's going fairly neutral and that it's picking up all kinds of colors in it. Okay, that's going a little orange there. And softer. This edge is a little bit softer too. Let's see if I can get that white a little bit cleaner. Okay, I managed to do it, but now it's too bright. So soften that up a little bit. Okay, so, and then I got that light blue that's happening there, and so it must be picking up a little bit of blue from the sky hitting there. And then you can also see that blue in here in the hair. Just going to just indicate it quickly so I just start to get an idea of that. And then it's then turning red where you're seeing more of the natural color of the hair. Let's get a little bit more orange and reds towards the top here. So that's really mixing with the black and neutralizing it a bit. So it's, even though I'm coming in with pure color, it is the black is helping knock that down a little bit. So let's get reinforce the black in here. Then I see a little bit of colors coming in. Who knows what color that is? And her hair comes out a little bit further there. And something like that. And a little bit of a sideburn there. She has something like that on the other side, but I think it's catching so much light that it's looking light blue and not dark like the rest of her hair. If I want, I can push that a little bit darker so it's not quite so ambiguous. Something like that. And then her hair is coming right down actually in front of her other features there. Okay, you guys are getting quite a bit of reflection there in that part of the painting, which I'm sorry for. It's not, I can pull the lamp up higher and that will help, but then it will start to reflect off the palette a little bit. But There, you're able to see it a little bit better. And let me adjust. I'm wondering if I can adjust the color a little bit in the panel so that you can see closer to what I see in the painting. So let me see. Let's do a little bit of, make it a little bit darker. Color intensity looks good. Maybe it's a little bit too blue overall, so let's maybe go a little bit more yellow. Okay, at least on my monitor, this is starting to look a little bit better. Not quite as blown out. Um, yeah, so that looks pretty good to me. Say color intensity. Bring that down a little bit. Okay, yep, that looks good. A little bit less contrast. There we go. Okay, maybe a little more color intensity. Yeah, I think that looks good. Okay, so I will keep that for now. And back to painting. Okay, so we're about an hour and 15 minutes in. We made some pretty good progress. Let me look at the questions real quick, see if I've missed anything. In Draw Nil says what kind of brushes you use for blocking the colors in the portrait. So I'll tend to use bigger brushes to block in bigger areas and try to keep it loose. And then I'll try to use some smaller brushes for detail, or sometimes I'll use the edge of a bigger brush to try to continue to keep it loose and fresh. Can you please give me the link of brushes you use? Okay, I think you'd already asked that and I didn't really say much. So I buy some brushes from Michaels. I buy some online on Dick Blick. I'll tend to buy sets of brushes that I think that look good, like Princeton brushes or Royal Langnickel. Um, some Creative Mark brushes, I'll tend to mix it up. And um, so I have a mix mash of different brushes here. I brought some really cheap brushes in the craft section of Michaels. They seemed okay at first, but the hairs seem to be falling out as I use them. So maybe, but they were cheap enough that I don't care. Um, so I know some painters, they even buy brushes at Home Depot for to buy their bigger brushes so that they're not spending a fortune on 2 or 3 inch wide brushes. Okay, and let me just get some of those dark reds going in the ear here. Okay, so, and then looking at the other side of her face, her jaw comes out, I think, just a little bit further too. And I'll get a measurement quickly. Yeah, that looks about right. And then her ear does come out just a little bit more. So let's get some of the background color going so I can adjust her profile a bit. Where's that bigger brush I was using? Okay, right here. Okay, so background. So fairly light blue here, almost white. And the hair comes out a bit further. Let me switch brushes so I don't have to do so much cleaning. And then her ear actually comes out a bit further out here. means the side of her face must be out a little bit more here. Okay, and she has the hollow of the cheek right there, and then the edge of her jaw. And then let me clean that up a little bit with a lightish blue-green. Oh, wow, my brush got away from me a little bit. Okay, and then it kind of goes a little bit more purple up here. Okay, it's really hard to get this edge close enough to the mouth the way it is in the reference. Your brain wants to pull it further away. So I really have to focus, make sure that's the right distance. Let's get this a little bit softer in her colors in her neck, because in the photo the neck is so soft. There's really very little detail that you can see. And there's some light oranges in her shoulders, in her collarbone, and then it drops down kind of more of a purple color down here. And then it's lighter along the edges, so it really can come in with pure white to lighten the color that's already there. Same on the other side, there's lots of white. Then it comes in a little bit darker, some orange, like I'd said before here. Again, purple. A little bit redder. Get some of that darker color that's coming in the side of the neck. Okay. So now I can get to see where this thing really got off from the resource, where the drawing is off. And I think part of it is it looks like the mouth got off a little bit to one side. No, that measures correctly. So I'll have to measure the nose, make sure that's right. Everything looks to be measuring correctly. Oops, sorry. So tip of the nose to the top. The nose can be coming down just a little bit, but it's pretty close to the right spot. Which means the mouth might be a little bit high too. That's easy to adjust. There's lots of little grays in here that I have to get, or else this thing won't hold together very well. Looking for a light pink. It's right here. A little bit darker. Still a touch darker. When you when you get the values right, when all of a sudden you start to see the form turn similar that it, in a way that it does in the photo. Okay, you need to get that right color in there. Just going to do a touch of black right there. And then soften it up a bit. See if I can get this transitional color that's in here. Okay, I'm going to do another hit of that depression alongside her nose. And alongside that, a little bit lighter and redder. Let's do that black again until it starts to read properly. Just real subtle color and value changes that really that are necessary for it to read properly. It took me a long time to figure that out, that I had to be much more subtle with the colors and values that I was putting down before things would read. So, let me see. What kind of brushes do you use? Oh, can you please give me a link of brushes you use? Okay, I answered that one already. Amy says, how long does it normally take you to do a painting? Well, tonight it's going to be about 2 hours, 2.5 hours. For portrait commissions, sometimes it's 8 to 20 hours or so, depending on whether I get the feel of it right away or it takes a long time. Depends on the quality of the photograph too, and whether I'm painting going really after a likeness and trying to go fairly tight, or if I can be a little bit looser and do it more like a portrait sketch. Sorry. And then, how long do you, to complete a painting? Okay, that's the rest of that question. Let's move my paint scraper over a little. Okay. Not really getting quite the anatomy of her neck right yet. change it a little bit because she seems to have a little bit extra. Um, don't know if it's kind of the angle that we're seeing a little bit more of the back of her neck here, but because it's so soft, it's reading like it's that her neck is sort of fatter on one side. So I may change that a little bit. It's something that sometimes will work in a photograph, but when you paint it, you can't get it to look right. And so this may be one of those things. Okay, just improving the shape of some of these um, features that I have in her face so that the likeness starts to pull together a little bit better. Let's pull this eye up a little bit higher. I've been avoiding that because it measured lower, but there might be something off about a couple of my measurements, and so to get it to work, I do sometimes have to fudge a little bit, which is fine. What's important is that it looks right in the end, not that it matches the photo exactly. So this may be one of those things about moving something a little bit just to get it to work. Okay, I want a detail brush just to be able to get the highlight in her eye. That'll do for now. That's reading correctly. Let's soften up some of these shapes here. That shadow hit again underneath her eye, and I'm just gonna bring her whole lower eyelid up a little bit higher. Yep, that is looking better. There's this one little area where the light is kind of hitting off of it. Let's clean this up a little here. This is where some of the subtlety comes in. I have to knock back some of these values that got too dark. And then I'm missing a little bit of dark here. And again, some more values here that are too dark. right here, paler. And then near the tip of her nose, a little bit of a highlight where it catches the light. And just put in a little bit extra lighter there, just to get the feeling of light hitting off of it. Okay, and so which brush do I need? Let me try this new one. It's a flat or a bright. I don't know which. Brights are shorter and flats are longer, and this one's kind of in between, so I don't know which one it is. But I suspect that it's a flat. Really want a softer transition um, in this red at the around the base of her nose. And we got a little more, the red coming up a little bit higher in some spots. And then we have this sense of highlight coming up very subtly and then hitting again. Just having these nice little reflective notes off the center of her nose. To get those to read, I need to come a little bit darker around it. And I want to make sure that I got those dark reds underneath her nose dark enough. Let's get a little bit of blue in there because I can see it. A hint of green. And then it goes a little bit darker on the outside of that. Is that right? A little bit more orange in that color. Then I got a hint of light here. It's kind of purple. Or pink. Let's see if I can get that color. Well, it's got a little more color in it than that, and it can get a little bit darker. So I have enough room to get the color in there. And I'm going to use some of that same color along here. Okay. Let's get back a little bit of that darker orange that's right here. That's making that particular shape. softer there. Okay, I really want to get a little more purple in the whites of her eye. It's reading a little too green. Okay, that's a little bit better. And let's pull the bottom edge of her eyelid down just a little bit lower. Oh, that was too low, but just gonna adjust it. That's it, right there. Okay. Okay, just gonna keep on going here, making good progress, and just working back and forth, trying to get some of the subtler colors to feel right. Soften up this edge here. And here. Okay, let me indicate where her jewelry is. I think that'll be nice to get that in. It's a little bit of a black shape right here. And then a spot of white with a little bit of blue or green around it. So let's just put a touch of that color in. Then I can just put a lump of white right on top of that. That's pretty close to what I'm seeing. Let's clean up the background a little. Clean up this shape. And just soften that up a bit. Get some of that warmer color that's coming down here. Okay, that's starting to look good. And fix that far. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Come back in with some of that hair color that I was seeing. Okay, it's not quite looking like hair yet, but I'll get there eventually. Okay, where was that other brush? Okay, this is my cleanup brush. It's a newish brush. It's that flat. It'll give me a lot of control. I can go thinner by using the edge of it. Get into some smaller places without grabbing a detail brush. Okay, because her head is tilted forward, we see more of this edge of the lower eyelid, the upper edge of it is pointing more towards us. So I want to get at least a fair amount of that showing, and that helps tell us a little bit more about the direction of her head. This brush may be just a little bit too big to get in here. Seem to have gotten it okay. Let's grab a little bit smaller brush. To refine the edge of that eye a little bit. There we go. I'm going to move that highlight over just a little bit. Okay, that's good. And I want to soften. Got to get a little paint on the brush first. Soften this up a little bit. So it needs to be light there and then a little bit darker in the corner. So I'm trying to get it to read as round. So you got to pay attention to the change of values there to get it. And then it's going to be naturally a little darker right underneath the upper eyelid. Okay. Let's see how that's looking. So it looks like this eye has to be a little bit wider. Especially the lashes come down the right spot, but I just didn't make her her eye feature altogether wide enough, because it comes out a little bit further over here. And then we have the shape of her brow coming out. Her brow comes up a little bit higher. Then we have the edge of her face here. We got that sideburn a little bit there. Okay, I'm seeing a little bit more blue now in this light, now that I have a little bit more values to compare. That looks about right. I feel like I need to find a little bit smaller brush than what I'm using here for some of these little highlighting things. Let's see what I have laying around. Okay, this one looks a little bit too beat up. I may not have a good detail brush here at the moment. Sometimes I'll have one or two and I'll use it a few times and then, I think I found one. This tip looks a little bit bent, but I think it will do the job. This is a small round. It's probably a number 2. Just need a little bit of red in the corner of her eye. Needs to go a bit darker than that. That looks good. And then it has a little bit of a highlight right in the middle of it. Yeah, something like that. And then we have the highlight coming around the outside. The lid. Okay, this brush is a little too beat up for my taste, so I might go back to a flat that's in good shape. Okay, let me see. Susan Cunningham says, what liquid are you rinsing your brushes in beside your palette? So I have a can here. This has Gamsol, which is a solvent for cleaning the brush, but also can be mixed with the paint and is a viable painting medium. It's not a medium per se, but it doesn't have any negative effects by thinning the paint with it. It dries cleanly. And then I also have, in this small cup, I have safflower oil, similar to linseed oil. It makes the paint more oily, and safflower oil has less of a yellow quality to it, and doesn't yellow as much when it dries as much as linseed oil. So for that reason, I prefer it. And gives you a little more dry time and just makes the paint a little more fluid. Whereas the Gamsol will tend to shorten your dry time because it evaporates quickly, leaving the paint drier quicker. right. I think I have to adjust this jawline over here quite a bit before it starts to look right. So I'm going to be working back and forth until I think I got it. I think there's a little more um, flesh here, like a little bit of a jowl, and then her chin maybe a little bit wider in that one spot. Let's make her bottom lip a little bit puffier, just a fraction. Bring the highlight up just a little bit higher. And she has just the thin light red underneath the lower lip. Just light catching around the lower edge of it. Before we get into that darkest dark of the shadow underneath. So that's right there. Okay, so that's starting to read slowly. Let's soften up the lights here. Okay, let me see. Geronimo, maybe, from Corona, California. Loving your demo. Good job. Well, thank you. Let's pull down the edge of this lip a little. It's a little bit of reddish purple gray that's above it here. It gets a little bit redder as it gets closer to the lip. And then this light here comes up a little bit higher. That's good. And then this lip is a little bit fatter on this edge here. And higher. Okay, just really sometimes searching to get the color right in some spots. Side of the face has to go a bit lighter. I made it darker, but I went a little bit too far. Okay, that's looking good. Let's change the shape of this a little bit so it comes out a little further. We got just a touch of light running through here. With a little bit of dark red around it. Just trying to get a little bit of that texture of the skin there. We have some eyelashes. We have where the light is hitting the eyelashes there, but we have eyelashes here. And actually the tips of some of them are catching that same light. So I'm wondering if I put some light here, will it help that effect? And then we got a bit of a highlight that's blue. Let's get the right color mixture that's right on top of the iris there. That helps that read. Let's lighten up some of these reddish lights on the tip of the nose or on the bridge of the nose. Okay, just trying to get that little bit of that shine going. That'll help make the form a little more convincing. Some beautiful blue highlights in here. If I can manage to get them light enough and the color to still read. A little bit of pink in there too. Yep, that looks about right. Just a little touch of light right here, shining off the white of the eye. I didn't quite get it there. And then we can add just a little bit more to it, just to really get it to sparkle. Oh yeah, that's nice. Let's see if we can get a little bit of those touches of light in there too. Really want to sell the eye hard, being kind of making it photographic looking. is we can be a little bit less literal in some other spots and get away with it. Okay, and I want to get this highlight that's right in here. It's kind of just dusty, violety color. Let's see. A little bit of blue in there, but lighter. That was definitely the wrong color there. Too dark. Okay, feeling like we're starting to get there. Let's get a little bit of that rosier red that's on the outer edge of the cheek. And then that kind of goes towards a grayer, darker and grayer right here. And let's widen this a little bit and have that dark come up along the outside. And widen the orange that's coming out here too. I think that's where we're missing a little bit of her face. Okay, and okay, I missed a few questions here. Milvi says, and hello from Kuwait. Welcome. I must be very late there. Susan Cunningham says, do you ever stand up and back away from the painting? Question mark. Unfortunately, I'm in such a small studio, it does make it hard, and then doing the demos, it's even harder, but it does allow you to get a better sense of where things are going astray. And but there's other devices you can use too. You can also squint down, and that helps. Um, but it doesn't, while it blurs out some of the detail, it doesn't give you that sense of distance that you sometimes need to really evaluate some of the actual underlying drawing in the painting where it might be off, and allows you to see better both the your resource and the painting at the same time if you back away. That's too bright. I wanted it to be grayer and lighter. The touch of orange in it. There we go. There's a bit hint of green or yellow right here. And there's something that looks like just a gray, greenish gray that comes up. Okay, let's adjust this negative space there. We got a lot more red color right in here. And a bit in here. And make her eye a little bit wider open. Or open wider. That seemed to be good. Okay, still need to adjust the shape of her lower lip a little bit. Not quite feeling right yet. Okay, we're a little bit over 2 hours in. I'm in pretty good shape. Need to figure out what I need to do to finish this thing, um, because I don't want to overwork it. Um, but it does need some things to get it to read properly. So just need to be really careful to make sure what I'm putting down is going to get me closer to where I want to go. So this is to separate the chin a little bit more from the neck. Has to be softer on this edge, harder underneath. And then there's a light that's coming down, a little bit blue in it. That is on the side of the chin too. Okay, again, soften some of these edges. see where the lip is off a little bit here and here. So the shadow in some spots needs to come up a little bit higher. So this is just, comparing the painting to the resource photo and adjusting things until they start to look right. Okay, and let's see. Darken up some of the darks in the eyebrows. There's a little bit of purple in there. Lengthen this negative shape a little bit. And there's, it's either hair from the eyebrows or hair or bangs. They kind of blend together. Okay. Okay, just some little subtleties that need to be changed, but I think I'm pretty close now. Alla says, can you paint a guy with a 5 o'clock shadow? I would love to learn how to give a hint of facial hair. Well, at some point soon I will look for the right subject. I've painted men and boys before with a little bit of hint of shadow, and it's just kind of painting the colors that you see up there. It's sort of, you'll naturally get a little bit more blues and greens around the muzzle area of the mouth. Um, and then if someone has a 5 o'clock shadow, that's kind of exaggerated. And then you just put in a couple strokes that kind of hint that there is hair there, and that is enough for the brain to fill in the rest. Let's go a little bit darker here underneath. This is the darkest spot right here. A little bit red. Just need a little bit cleaner pink there in the top of the cheek. Maybe too clean. So it can get a little bit grayer. Where was that color? There. Just remix it. Oops. There's a hint of green right here in the hollow of the cheek. So I can exaggerate that a little. And let's get the right angle to the jaw here. Comes in a little. But then you can tell her jaw is a little bit tight because it protrudes out a little bit at this one spot. It's a sign of that her teeth are pressed together. And that curves around nicely. Right there. Okay. Let's get some of this cleaned up. Okay, let's see where I am with this. A little bit of darker red here, orange-y red. And it gets darker in a few spots. Right there. Okay, I'm getting very close to the finish here. Just maybe want to resolve her hair to make it look a little bit more like hair and not just random paint strokes. I may want to clean up some of the transitions in her neck. They're feeling a little bit, I don't know, a little rough. I just want to soften it up a bit. Just soften it all up. Some lighter, some darker. get a little bit of blue in the hair too for some interest. Seeing kind of a hint of a blue cast right in here. And then I can go a little bit lighter right in there. Trying to get the shape of strands of hair going. And then I'm getting much lighter. Again, some blues and some closer to the hair color. Okay. So very close here. I'm going to try to finish by 11:30, which is about 5 minutes from now. Just to remind you, if you haven't subscribed to my channel and you want to get notifications of when I go live the next time or times after that, please subscribe to my channel and click on the bell icon to make sure that you get the notifications. Just a few places I feel like I need to soften up, but otherwise I think it's looking pretty good, and I might do a little bit of cleanup before I post it to my Instagram account. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you enjoy this demo. If you did, please wait till the demo ends and leave me a thumbs up or a comment, and that way becomes part of the permanent comments as opposed to the discussion during the video, which people would only see if they watch the video. I'm just going to throw in a few highlights right here. I think that's really going to help this. And I may have skewed the face a little bit. I won't tell and be able to tell until I really stand back and look, unfortunately. And it's a little hard to do during the demo. Let's get a little bit more gray, purple in the earlobe here. That's better. Where's that purple again? Okay, some areas that I can see off the bat need to be softer or cleaned up. Okay, so I think this is a good spot to stop. Thank you all for joining me. Obviously, Susan says, me again, I'm seeing her eyes as more hooded, like the upper lids are heavier, darker. Do you, or are you intentionally keeping them lighter? No, I just haven't had a chance to really stand back and try to adjust some of those things. Hollow One says, can you paint oh, I already read that one. Okay, well, thank you very much, and hope you enjoyed this, and have a great night. I'm trying to figure out how to stop streaming. I think I click in three places. Hope you enjoyed this setup. I'm going to try to repeat it again for future demos. Have a good night.